Hi, I'm Adam Berkelmans, and today we're making wild mulberry pizza. This recipe was created by Lindsay Bartosh, a field staff writer for Harvesting Nature. She writes, typically found staining sidewalks, the mulberry is an incredible underutilized fruit. While most people think of the berry as a nuisance, creating purple Van Gogh-style messes on the bottom of shoes, their sweet and tangy flavor adds to many culinary experiences. The berries can be used in desserts such as pies or crumbles, or for building complex wines or liquors, as hearty and rustic glazes for a variety of meats, or even in crazy sounding dishes like pizza or grilled cheese sandwiches. Despite their physical resemblance to raspberry and blackberry, mulberries are a closer relative to figs. Their flavor is also much richer and even a touch savory when compared to a blackberry or raspberry. While adding sugar to the berries results in sweet desserts, the core flavor of the berry works beautifully for heartier meals. Mulberries are not commercially sold due to their harvesting difficulty. The delicate fruit must be hand-picked, making harvesters easily identifiable by the deep purple ink stains covering their fingertips, and also has a relatively short shelf life. Foraging the berry makes for a great family outing, albeit a bit messy, and the harvests can be used for a large variety of recipes. Thanks, Lindsay. While the thought of mulberry pizza may sound a bit crazy to some people, I've found some historical evidence that may point towards Italians eating mulberries on their pizza well before the pizza margherita was ever invented. See, at some point in the Middle Ages, Italians began planting mulberry trees to produce a special product that had been invented by the Chinese thousands of years before: silk. Silk is actually made by spinning threads from silkworm cocoons, and these silkworms are farmed to produce these cocoons. The silkworms themselves eat only mulberry leaves and nothing else, so mulberry is absolutely necessary for creating silk. In the Middle Ages, Italians brought home the technology and began planting mulberry trees across the Tuscan and Florentine countryside, intent on producing their own silk. This would have not only produced Italian silk, but Italian mulberries as well, a delicious bonus crop. Around that same time, what we know as pizza was forming, though it didn't quite look like the pizza of today. Romans, years before, often enjoyed flatbreads topped with cheeses and fruits, and this practice continued on into the medieval period, where the peasantry would enjoy roasted flatbreads with sweet fruits or savory toppings. Considering these same peasants were likely working the silk farms and needed something quick, easy, and cheap to eat, it's not that much of a stretch of the imagination to think that they'd be topping their flatbreads with mulberries or mulberry compotes. Well, that's my theory anyway, but maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The origins of pizza stretch back like a well-made dough to a much earlier time. In fact, some legends say that just like silk, the origins of pizza can be traced back to China, where the OG intrepid eater Marco Polo tried a food named Kong Yu Ming. Basically a flatbread stuffed with cheese and onions. Marco Polo loved it so much that he brought the recipe back to Italy with him and tried to get an Italian baker to replicate it. Not able to get it right, the exasperated baker ended up just throwing the ingredients on top of the flatbread rather than stuffing them into it, accidentally creating the very first pizza. Unfortunately, like most neat and tidy origin stories, this likely never happened. Although flatbreads did exist in China for time immemorial, they also existed in many other places before recorded history. Once humans started harvesting and processing grains, it was a quick step to move from grain porridges to grainy flatbreads cooked on hot, flat rocks. Once processing technology advanced, lighter flours would have been made available to create flat doughs. Eventually, the Egyptians discovered yeast, creating a softer, easier to digest dough that slowly morphed into what is now modern bread. These flat doughs were popular across much of the world, with Egyptians and Greeks and Persians, as well as many others, all regularly eating them. Persian soldiers were known to bake flatbreads topped with cheese and dates on top of their shields in between battles, while the Greeks were topping theirs with herbs, onions, and garlic, or with fruit purees, as well as cheese, and offering them up to the gods. As mentioned before, the Romans also ate flatbreads, often topping them with cheese and fruits, as well as honey and oil. There was even a painting found in Pompeii depicting these tasty snacks. Bread making progressed along with other technologies, and flatbreads just got better and better. Manikish was becoming very popular in the Middle East, while focaccia was commonly eaten in Tuscany, having been developed by the Etruscans. Pita was also being made in Greece by this point, a bread with a suspiciously similar name to pizza, especially when you consider that Naples started out as a Greek settlement. Although some historians point towards earlier examples of pizza, it is generally agreed that Naples was the true birthplace of it. By the 1600s, flatbreads called pizzas were being sold by street vendors to poor working class people who needed something cheap to eat on the go. These pizzas are usually topped with garlic, salt, lard, and cheese. As more vendors popped up, more toppings appeared, and the pizzas became more varied to suit local tastes and trends. It is thought that basil may have been a common topping on these early pizzas. Around this time, the tomato showed up in Naples as well, having been brought over from the New World by the Spanish. This humble ingredient changed Italian food forever. No one knows exactly when the first street vendor tried adding tomatoes to pizza, but by the early 1700s, Neapolitan marinara pizzas, topped with tomato sauce, oregano, olive oil, and garlic, were already popular. Legend has it that pizza margherita, thought to be the archetype for all modern pizzas, was created in 1889, commissioned by the palace to serve up to visiting Queen Margherita. The pizziolo, or pizza maker, topped the pizza with green basil, red tomato sauce, and white mozzarella cheese to match the colors of the Italian flag. Unfortunately, like most neat and tidy origin stories, this likely never happened. It turns out that a pizza with those same toppings was being eaten in Naples nearly 100 years before, and that the name didn't become margherita until the 1930s. The story does show us something interesting though. At some point between the 1600s and the 1800s, pizza went from a poor person's food, commonly seen even as filthy, to a food fit to be served to a queen. By the early 1800s, the first pizzerias had opened, serving pizza to seated guests rather than simply as a street food meant to be devoured quickly while walking. Although pizzas at this time were often made with tomato sauce, basil, anchovies, mushrooms, and cheese, nearly half of all pizzas sold were still sweet. As taste trended towards savory, these sweeter pies slowly became less popular. Pizza first crossed the ocean at the beginning of the 1900s, with Italian neighborhoods in New York, Boston, and Chicago hosting the first pizza makers in the US. These early American pizzas were generally only enjoyed by Italian immigrants, and pizza remained mostly unknown to the rest of America. That is, until American soldiers returned home from the Italian front in World War II. They had been enjoying pizza and other Italian delights while serving and had developed an appetite for them, which they brought home. Suddenly, pizza was very much in demand. By the 1950s, it had become a household name, even appearing in the popular show I Love Lucy. A squeamish American populace wasn't all too sure about that foreign-sounding pizza, though, so they called it tomato pie, which can still be seen in many old cookbooks today. As they say, the rest is history. Actually, this whole thing has been history. Whatever. Pizza became its own thing in America, with new styles and variations popping up all over the place. New York style, Chicago style, Detroit style, some abomination from Canada with pineapple on it. Oops, did I say that out loud? Today, many American pizzas bear little resemblance to the original Neapolitan pizzas from the 18 and 1900s. Though, to be fair, and I'm talking to you snooty pizza purists, Neapolitan pizzas bear little resemblance to the pizzas that became before them. Food is an ever-evolving and ever-changing thing, which is partly why I love it so much. I also love it when I see things come full circle, like Lindsay's pizza served with mulberry fruit. While pizza purists may scoff, those in the know understand that pizza like this was probably enjoyed well before the first margherita was ever even conceived. This pizza makes 4 servings and takes about 45 minutes to make. If you don't have access to mulberries, you can also make this with blackberries or huckleberries. Ingredients: store-bought or pre-made pizza dough, 2.5 cups of fresh basil leaves, 1/4 cup extra virgin olive oil, 1 clove of garlic minced, half a cup of walnuts or any nut you have on hand, including pine nuts or pecans, etc., 1/4 cup shredded Parmesan cheese, 2 cups of fresh mulberries, 4 large yellow onions, thinly sliced. 2 tablespoons of oil for onions. I used avocado oil, but you could use olive oil. 1 tablespoon of salt. 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. 1 cup of shredded mozzarella cheese. 6 ounces of goat cheese. And a balsamic glaze. To prepare. Since they require the most time, start the caramelized onions first. In a large cast iron pan, add 2 tablespoons of cooking oil of your choice. Heat the oil over medium-low heat and add the 4 thinly sliced onions. In the beginning, the onions may overwhelm the pan, but will cook down quickly. Stir the onions and ensure they are coated in the cooking oil. Slow cook for 10 minutes over medium-low heat. Ensure the heat is high enough to soften the onions, but not so high that the onions are burning. Stir every few minutes to prevent the onions from sticking to the pan. After 10 minutes, sprinkle the onions with a tablespoon of salt. Allow it to continue slow cooking for an additional 10 minutes. The onions should be soft and starting to brown slightly by this point. Continue occasionally stirring throughout the cooking process. Add a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar to the onions, stir to coat, and continue cooking until the onions reach the desired level of caramelization, about 10 minutes. I stopped mine after 10 additional minutes, but the actual cooking time depends on the moisture content of the onions and could take up to an additional half hour. While the onions are caramelizing, preheat the grill to high heat and the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Prepare the basil pesto. To the food processor, add 1.5 cups of fresh basil leaves. Reserve a half cup of the basil leaves for topping the pizza after cooking. Pulse the leaves 2 or 3 times to coarsely chop. Add the garlic clove and walnuts to the food processor, pulse 2 or 3 times to chop. With the food processor running, slowly stream in 1/4 cup of olive oil until a smooth paste is formed. Once the paste is well blended, add the Parmesan cheese to the food processor and pulse a few times to incorporate. Remove basil pesto from the food processor and set aside. To the food processor, add 1 cup of fresh mulberries. Reserve the additional cup of whole berries for topping the pizza. Pulse the mulberries 2 or 3 times, just enough to create a chunky, rough jam for spreading on the pizza. Roll out the pizza dough to the desired thickness, place it on the preheated outdoor grill. Cook for 1 to 2 minutes and then flip for an additional 2 minutes. The dough will bubble when it's ready to flip on the first side. Remove from grill and it's time to start topping the pizza. To the pre-cooked pizza crust, spread a thin and even layer of basil pesto. Next, add a layer of ground mulberry. Spread the cup of shredded mozzarella over the mulberry jam. Now add a few tablespoons of the caramelized onions, and finally drop chunks of the goat cheese and the whole mulberries on top of the pizza. Cook in the preheated oven for 12 minutes or until the goat cheese is gooey and the crust is slightly browned. To serve, tear up the reserved fresh basil leaves and sprinkle over the warm pizza. Drizzle with a healthy serving of balsamic glaze. Enjoy! For more great wild fish and game recipes, be sure to subscribe and follow Harvesting Nature's Wild Fish and Game podcast.